Welcome aboard Delta Airlines. Please enjoy your flight, and thanks for choosing Delta.
Jody Avirgan here. Thanks for listening to ESPN Film's 30 for 30 podcast from the producers of the award-winning 30 for 30 series. These new audio documentaries are an incredible collection of sports stories you need to hear to believe. It's really a win-win. Delta Airlines makes your travel experience easy and enjoyable with real-time bag tracking, e-boarding, and passport scanning during check-in. And ESPN's 30 for 30 podcasts make your in-flight time rich with stories that will keep you coming back for more. So sit back, relax, and keep listening to some of the most compelling sports stories ever told.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugatz podcast.
This music is meant simply to bother Sarah Spain. That's where we're starting? Okay, that's where we're starting. Keep an eye on First Take here. Pablo and Bomani are on First Take today, but Stephen A. Smith is prowling around the premises. He's He's sauntering in. He's mad.
Shirt is untucked.
He's mad at LeBron James, and he is sauntering onto the set, staring at his phone. And
oh my God, I love the untucked shirt. Like I'm off today. Okay. But I'm going to show up.
Okay, well, is he off today? I don't know. He keeps coming off of vacation. Every time something happens that requires an opinion.
He is indeed off today,
shirt.
yes.
Oh
he is off.
gosh.
He is off.
All right, well, keep an eye on it because at any
showman.
point this will require us to break into... What?
Not about where he stands. He's got a lot of interests. He's got a lot of things to consider. Certainly when I quoted one of his confidants who said...
he started off saying, I'm all up in LeBron's feelings.
Yeah. He's here for one segment.
Well, hold on a second. Turn this down for a second because all up in LeBron's feelings is where I want to start today. Because does anyone else marvel in 2017, and thanks to Sarah Spain for being in with us today, that we are doing something in journalism we've never done before. We are absolutely reporting on the condition of LeBron's feelings with Windhorst going... He's disappointed, he's devastated, and now we've gotten to angry. Now he wants to beat Kyrie Irving up. This is something I have never seen before. We are reporting on someone's feelings because he's really famous and everyone seems to care about his feelings.
I'm okay with it. Like, I'm totally cool with it. I know you as a journalist probably a little bit uncomfortable with it. I feel like this is the kind of journalism I've been waiting for my entire life, and I could jump into the game right now.
Well, this is usually our purview, right? This is where we jump in and say, I bet this is what he's feeling. It's not where the beat reporter who follows the team around all day and breaks the scoops is usually reporting.
Well, I want to talk about this. We talked about this some yesterday because Sarah's had a non-traditional path toward some of the things at ESPN. And when I say non-traditional, I mean she didn't come from newspapers. And most of the people who are on ESPN giving their opinions come from newspapers because ESPN borrowed on the credibility of newspapers until it killed newspapers or helped kill the sports page. And you have in the newspaper a distinction between reporters and columnists that I don't believe gets made by the general viewing public or reading public. Reporters report facts. Columnists give their opinions. Stephen A. Smith is a cornucopia of both things, and what you get to is a situation in 2017 journalistically where he's perfectly comfortable threatening LeBron James and Kevin Durant that he's going to report stuff that he knows if they continue to make an enemy out of him. Listen to the sound. This is old sound on Durant.
You don't want to make an enemy out of me. And I'm looking right into the camera, and I'm going to say it again. You do not want to make an enemy out of me. I'm not having it.
And so yesterday he does something similar, not quite like that, but he's telling LeBron James, hey, if you keep disputing what I'm saying, I'm going to report other stuff I know. And that's not something I've ever seen before done in sports journalism out loud. I've seen it done in private, but not by reporters who would want that behavior seen by the public.
Was I wrong when I broke the story that he was going to South Beach? Was I wrong when I talked about how I'm hearing he's going back to Cleveland? I just refuse to believe it because who the hell would want to leave South Beach? But I am hearing he's going back to Cleveland. What if I got into the real story about what happened with LeBron James against Boston the year before or that spring when he finally decided to leave Cleveland and take his talents to South Beach? But we don't want to get into that.
Yes,
Sarah,
we do.
Well, we do.
Yeah, we want to know.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, I'd pay money for it.
How do you feel about all of that?
Well, it seems like a microcosm for our larger issues with journalism right now. The sports world everything is getting muddied by whether you think that a Deadspin story is the same as a Wojnarowski story is the same as, something that they argue about in First Take, whatever it is. It feels the same as people who can't tell the difference between some sort of 9/11 truther story on a site called newswith5zs.com versus being broken by, a legitimate news source we've trusted forever. That feels like the same thing. At this point now, we want as much information as possible, as quickly as possible. And then if you're smart enough to figure out what seems like legit and what isn't, then you can figure out how to parse it. And if you're not, you just take it all as truth.
But Stephen A. Smith is an evolution and a combination of all of those things because his sourcing is impeccable.
Right.
His credentials, especially on basketball, there is no disputing the connections and there is no disputing the credibility. But also he's doing some things that are oh, here we go.
Listen to him, not listen to me. Boy, is he in for a rude awakening, because no matter what I have to say, it is nothing compared to what's coming once I return from my vacation.
Another threat.
Oh, man.
It is so
That is great.
unusual.
It's awesome. He's
is
entertaining,
Is
man.
Baloney yelling at him?
Why you got no cashmere jacket? You got the cashmere and the 13.
Well, actually, First Take, we have First Take, we have standards, and on this show with these standards, you two have admirably lived up to it. Look at the way you guys are so dapper right now. I saw you the other day in New York, Mamani.
Now, this is something I have not seen. It's just not something I've seen before. And God bless him, because I think Stugatz is right. It is good television and it's good radio. Right. It is absolutely those things. And it's in keeping with his personality, which is a little bit of professional wrestler. But is that what the 2017 sports journalist is?
Yeah.
Well, I think you need both. I think you need the Stephen A. Stephen A. is entertaining, and as you're right, he comes with great sources. But you also need the folks that have none of that. You need the Schefters and you need the Wojs, where you're like, I don't ever question whether they're giving me what they think is 100% truth. I don't think they're selling it. I don't think, you know what I mean?
But it's a different kind of reporting. They're reporting actual facts. He's reporting feelings. It's a big difference, right?
Well, but Stephen A. will occasionally, like when he reported that he thought LeBron was going to Miami, that was the same kind of report you'd get from Woj or someone else. Sure. But you get it delivered in a way that's got a ton of showmanship, which is fine. But I think you do need, it's something we talked about when the layoffs were going on. They keep a lot of names and people that you recognize, but meanwhile, all those people are buoyed by the work of those who are there every single day actually getting the stories.
In Stephen A.'s defense, he claims he was told that quote verbatim, which is what a reporter would run with. Here's him speaking for himself on that.
Ladies and gentlemen, LeBron James sent out a tweet about me responding to Slam Magazine, talking about not facts, people. Boo, get another source. It's talking about me. It's talking about what I reported. And what I reported was that if LeBron James was in front of Kyrie Irving, I was told, quote, he would be tempted to whoop his. But that's a quote. That's what was told to me. I did not speculate. I did not put that out there. It was told to me verbatim in that manner. Tempted. See, my name's not some of the people that LeBron James sits down and interviews with. I understand he don't want to sit down with me. Fine. I could care less. But let's be clear. LeBron James likes comfort. And let's just say I don't make him too comfortable.
One of the things that I like, but I'm curious how you guys feel about it, because what Sarah just talked about, the idea of when the layoffs came, and a lot of what you heard was, how could you let go of Ed Werder, fact-based Ed Werder, and keep the gas bags that you have on the air that are not fact-based, that they're opinion-based, they are opinion makers, and it's part of the reason I believe people complain that ESPN has a liberal bent, because you've got opinions being given about sports that largely aren't conservative. A lot of places all over ESPN are pro-athlete. But I ask you this question, and I ask it seriously. Would ESPN be someplace that had a lot more viewers if it was totally neutral? If everybody was Schefter or Buster Olney or Kirkshin or that if everyone was doing the reporting, because Stephen A. Smith is doing it a different way. He's getting the same kind of information that those guys get, but he's got the bombast and the cartoonishness, and I'm just curious. And that show rates, and it's one of the few at ESPN that has had a ratings bump. And for all the criticism that First Take gets, Stephen A. Smith is one of the very few people in sports media who moves the ratings needle. So my question to you is, if you're complaining about the people that ESPN has fired, would you prefer a network that was totally neutral?
Of course not. If you look at, like you said, First Take rates so well because part of sports and what people want to engage in is the idea of barbershop or bar talk, which is give me something that's a strong opinion that I could disagree with. People will hate listen to radio, right? They will have someone that they almost never agree with, and they will hate listen to it so that they can be screaming back disagreements in their mind and debating them in their own mind. And you won't have that if it's just straight facts. That's not to say that the facts aren't needed. You need that to buoy the work, right? That's why ESPN is the best, because it's got the most information and the best information and the most accurate stuff. And then once you've been given that, then you make your opinion based on that. You need both.
I mean, he's got all the information, as much information as anyone. He's just delivering it in a very entertaining style. I don't know. Would Stephen A. Smith be like this if he didn't have First Take? If he was just reporting on stuff?
No.
He's got to stay in that character,
no,
right?
Well, it's not. But is it staying in a character? Because I do believe this is him, but he is a professional wrestler.
The volume's turned up on it now, but he was bombastic when he was covering the NBA, so much so that he got quite frankly.
But you know what I miss? See, one of the things that I miss is the time where, and it seems weird to me that this is something that would come from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, but Howard Cosell and Muhammad Ali going back and forth at each other is something that feels absent from sports coverage now. It seems like it was more fun back then. They were both in on the joke, and neither of them, they weren't friends. They were in on the joke. They were doing an act. And it's because the media personality was every bit the personality that the athlete was. And so Stephen A. Smith has created a character for himself, and it's in keeping within his personality. He's every bit the star that these guys coming at him are. I mean, obviously not LeBron, but you understand what I'm saying. He's an enormous media star, and so he doesn't have any fear about doing what I've never seen done before publicly on ESPN's airwaves, which is to simply threaten Kevin Durant and LeBron James.
Dan Le Batard.
Do you refer to the yellow sauce at a hibachi restaurant as yum yum sauce? 57% of the audience said no.
Stugats.
Do you go ginger, 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 yum yum, yum yum, yum yum, yum yum, yum yum, or yum yum, yum yum, yum yum, yum yum? 38% of the audience said yum yum, yum yum, yum yum. So they get 3 yum yum sauces. They ditch the ginger, get 2 yum yums with an additional yum yum. Second place was ginger yum yum. Fat Chris said earlier no one goes ginger, ginger. 18% of the audience goes ginger, ginger. And 18% of the audience also goes yum, 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 yum. How about that?
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
That was fairly amazing, listening to that rejoin. Stugats being efficient, reading everything correctly during the break. Sarah Spain took what he had been reading that he blamed on Roy for a typo, read it herself, and realized Roy made no typo, that Stugats just reads poorly.
Yep, sorry, Roy.
Shocking.
Yeah. And we determined that's
Real
a
plot
$2
twist
fine.
there.
Yeah, $2 fine when Stugats lashes out and blames someone else for something that is actually his fault.
Mm-hmm.
And
fine has been paid.
Yes, it has been paid, but you never pay these things without reluctance. Like, you yelled in every direction, you blamed Roy. Like, you do this great camouflaging dance. You spray a blue mist from your mouth in Mike Ryan's face. Like, you do this camouflaging dance before you ever pay your fines.
Right.
You never just say, yes, you're right, I'm wrong. We have to shame you in it and then prove it to you.
Yep.
Like, even Sarah read it, handed it back to you, and you were still arguing it.
I was just seeing if I could wiggle my way out of it. I couldn't. I realized very quickly that I couldn't, and I just took the $2 out of my pocket and put it down. That's it.
I think you guys should have a deposit like a bank where there's just something that opens and then you just slip it towards them and they put it in the fine bucket. And it should be right next to you because, let's be honest, that's where most of the transactions are occurring.
Okay, that's fair. Like a chute, though. Like a chute.
Ooh,
like a
the chute.
through-
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I love the chute.
Ooh,
When
I used to love the chute when we were
do.
little.
Yeah.
Put it in that tube.
See, if I have a choice, right, like they're usually at the bank I go to, there are 2 lanes. One has the chute and one doesn't. One, you go directly to the teller. I love
has a
going to the
chute?
chute. Yes, still has the chute. I love going to the chute.
Well, let me think for a second.
Who deposits money in a bank?
Me?
Like, you go to a bank and you have that much cash that you need to deposit it?
Yeah.
Yeah, from the latest Ponzi scheme. He needs it. He needs to.
Everything's. I forgot. Everything's like under the table.
Right. He needs to
can't
launder
get anything in checks or
I have several
direct
businesses,
deposit because then he'd have to, acknowledge it for tax purposes.
Hold on a second. Is the thing at the bank that takes, in a space vessel that takes it to the teller, is that indeed known as a chute?
Space vessel?
Yeah, like
not going to space.
I know, but it feels like something futuristic, does it not?
Well, actually, now it feels like something from the past. Because I remember being a kid and always using, but like now I just take a photo of a check on my phone and deposit it that way.
I think they refer to it as a bank tube. Bank tube.
Nobody
says after Googling it.
Nobody refers
like
to
reading
it.
I think if I remember correctly,
Nobody refers
from me
to
just
it as
Googling
a bank
it.
Tube. Who refers to it as a bank tube?
I mean, it appears just about everyone.
I prefer shoot.
What was that, Mike? It was once futuristic, correct? The reason we were reason we were amazed by it as kids is because you put your money here and you press a button and it shoots into the sky and ends up on a flume and rides back over that teller. Do people still use that? Do people really still use those?
They are called pneumatic tubes.
Pneumatic, like PNEU?
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting, like a mnemonic device. What does pneumatic mean, I wonder? Do you know what a mnemonic device is?
I don't know what we're talking about right now.
A mnemonic device is when you use like a trick to help remind yourself of something. So if I wanted to remember your name was Dan, I would say, devastatingly handsome Dan, and that would remind me of that, or slimy Stew.
Right, okay.
Right? Like a mnemonic device helps you.
This is not helpful at all about what we're talking about.
Well, but it's pneumatic. I'm curious about
your mnemonic muscle.
No, I'm just curious about the roots of the word pneumatic. Pneumatic. I wonder what pneumatic means.
By the way, my pharmacy also has these tubes. I can't pronounce whatever they're called. They have, and I put my prescriptions in the tube. I put them in. They send me the medication right back.
What year are you living? Okay, pneumatic means containing or operated by air or gas under pressure. What was that noise?
You haven't noticed what that noise is? It's the pneumatic tube.
The noise.
They played it like 6 or 7 times.
You didn't notice?
What did you think was happening in the background?
I honestly thought it involved Stew in a toilet.
There does seem to be some water traded.
Why is there water in there?
Be water.
Why is there water? There is water in there. Is it landing in a bowl of the teller's soup?
I think that's a false noise. I don't think that's correct.
Truth be told, we did an NBA lottery game back in the past, and that was a payoff sound after the NBA lottery when the ping pong balls came out. I don't know why there's water.
I asked the question again. Why is there liquid involved in this transaction?
Hey, buddy, the wait is over. It's the 2017 Sui Awards, starting August 21st. The Sui Awards. Dan Batard.
They're talking sports, going at it as hard as they can.
Stugats.
They're talking sandwiches, going at it as hard as they can.
This is the Dan Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. The Dan Le Batard Show is brought to you by Pennzoil Synthetics, taking synthetic motor oil performance to a whole new level. Make the switch to Pennzoil Synthetics today. Guest on the Dan Le Batard Show. Appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance line. Here's your SportsCenter update. Phoenix Suns backup point guard Brandon Knight suffered a torn ACL in his left knee last week and is expected to miss the entire 2017-2018 season, the team announced. Novak Djokovic is going to miss the rest of this season because of an injured right elbow. That means Djokovic will pull out of the U.S. Open and end his streak of participating in 51 consecutive Grand Slam tournaments. And finally, if you tell Siri, I see a little stiletto of a man, Siri will recite the rest of the lyrics to Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody.
I see a little silhouette of a man.
For all the latest headlines and information... I don't know what I said.
You're going to get something different if you say a man in stilettos.
A stiletto of a man is going to get you something very different if you say it's a Siri.
All right. For all the latest headlines and information, I ain't saying anything to Siri. Certainly not big words. For all the latest headlines and information, tune to the SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day.
Mike, go ahead and just do it on the air so people don't have to do it with their own Siri.
It takes a while. She really...
I see a little silhouette of a man.
Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the Fandango? Thunderbolt and lightning, very, very frightening me. Galileo, 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 Galileo Figaro Magnifico. I'm just a poor assistant. Nobody loves me. It's just a poor assistant from a poor family. Spared its life from this monstrosity. Easy come, easy go. Will you let me go? Bismillah. No, we will not let you go. Let it go. Bismillah. We will not let you go. Let it go. Bismillah. We will not let you go. Let me go. Will not let you go. Let me go. Never, never let you go. Never let me go. Oh, no, 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 no.
Oh, mamma mia, mamma mia, mamma mia, let me go. Beelzebub has a devil put aside for me.
Mike,
for me, for me.
Wow, Roy playing the air guitar furiously.
You want me to try my word?
Is there a more difficult song to
try
not sing along to?
That's the hardest. We did not get a lot of people there singing at the same time the same words. But go ahead and do it Stugatz's way.
I see a little silhouette of a man.
Stiletto.
Silhouette. But hang on.
Stiletto.
All right, hang on. I see a little stiletto of a man.
I don't know what that means.
Nobody does, Siri.
Didn't we say that Stugatz reading wrong is a key element of the show, right? We can't lose this.
Oh yeah, no fines for that.
Yep, no fines.
Texters are writing in based on the conversation we were having in the first segment, and our thanks to Sarah Spain for being in with us today. A lot of people, did they hear me wrong, or did I represent myself incorrectly? Guy writes in here, you question Stephen A's reports. When has he ever been wrong? You are wrong here, Sarah. Stephen A is an amazing reporter. Can you tell me a report where Stephen A was wrong? I don't believe any of us here were saying that Stephen A is not an exceptional reporter.
No, there was no accusation of the facts being wrong, simply the presentation being different.
But he's defending what he does. He's defending his information against LeBron James, probably the world's greatest athlete. And that's not something you normally see in journalism and reporting. And he's doing it in a very entertaining way. I'm totally fine with that. Like LeBron saying, hey, you credible guy, no, what you're saying is not true. And Stephen A is saying, hey, I heard it from the guys that you hired.
Right, I
it's
think
true.
Maybe what they're mistaking is what I was saying, which is that you need the people on the ground every day doing the work in the locker rooms, getting the interviews, working with the team, getting the sources to feed it so that the talking heads that people are attached to and that they like have the information. That's not to say that Stephen A doesn't have his own information or that his information is wrong, merely that you need both. And he can serve both purposes, but not everybody does.
But I do feel that in this particular circumstance, I'm being left behind, that my sensibilities are being left behind, replaced by what I believe to be Stugatz's more fun but more dangerous and more reckless way of consuming news media. And maybe I'm just not evolving fast enough when I see what's happening here with Stephen A. Smith. And I'm like, you know what? It's not okay for a reporter to publicly threaten the big athletes, no matter how entertaining you find it.
Right.
It's a weird thing. Right. It's a weird way for us to use the platforms.
Is it okay for athletes to use their platform? Because everyone has a platform now.
Right, not to threaten reporters, though. We freak out when athletes do
whenever
that.
DeMarcus Cousins does it, he gets traded.
Right, but you have LeBron questioning the reporting of a very credible guy in Stephen A. Smith, and Stephen A. Smith getting the information from guys who LeBron James has surrounded himself with.
Right, I mean, I think it's LeBron's MO if he wants to question something, even if he knows it's true, believing that if it comes out of his mouth that it's not true, people will trust that that's the case. But with Durant, what was the precipitation for the threat there?
Durant was upset at Stephen A. and had come at Stephen A. in a way that was hard. He came at him hard. And so should the footing be equal there? When I ask you this question, what's the answer to this question? Should reporters treat athletes exactly as athletes treat reporters, even if athletes are behaving poorly? Because none of you would be okay with an athlete threatening a reporter, even as you might find it entertaining. Right. You might find it entertaining, but you wouldn't be okay with it. Like it's not something that you'd say, you know what, that athlete should not get punished at all for threatening a reporter.
I think it's about being fair, unless you're Stugatz. Like Stugatz gets away with just being like trashing everybody. But I think if you are attempting to be someone who's respected,
right,
and good at your job,
credible,
then you care about being fair, which in the end, that's the line that I would say an athlete would draw too. If you're criticizing me, are you doing it fairly for things that I've done wrong or performance or whatever?
So is it fair, though? Do you view it as fair if LeBron James disputes a story that you've reported, thus questioning your credibility and your integrity? Is it then fair for you to come back at him by saying, do not make an enemy out of me? I will start reporting the stuff I know that I haven't reported.
I think it's fair to get the message across that you stand by the validity of your report and that you would like him not to challenge it. I think that's very different than you don't want to become it. I mean, his lines sound straight out of an action movie, and I'm not criticizing Stephen A. It's very entertaining, but
LeBron is criticizing his work, Dan. That's what he's doing. He's criticizing Stephen A.'s craft. Why can't Stephen A. come back at him the way Stephen A. wants to come back at him? Because he's LeBron James? That doesn't make sense to me.
Stugatz, because you're arguing things through your sensibilities, which is I get to say whatever I want about whomever I want. I could call J.J. Watt a phony, and I'm arguing them through my sensibilities, which is I have never before publicly threatened to expose an athlete with stuff that I know because he has wronged me. Like, it's just not something that I would do. But I'm not a professional wrestler as a journalist, and I'm not the personality type that Stephen A. Smith is. But Sarah Spain mentioned that it could be something out of an action movie, the way that he talks. And it's funny how odd it is that we can all imagine what that would sound like together.
I sit here today incredibly offended by the personal attack that this man has put against me.
In a world with hot takes, his takes might be the hottest.
Kevin Durant is the one that's lying.
Kevin Durant is in too deep.
You know, I made a mistake.
With a man you don't want to make an enemy out of. The Slim Reaper versus the suit with 400 buttons.
I don't want to hear from you, and nobody else should either.
McDonald's All-American.
Am I human? Do you look at me that way?
Versus McDonald's commercial.
Had I had to come on the air that next day, I can promise you it would have been very bad.
Stephen A. Smith.
Forget the numbers. You don't need them. Look at his eyes.
Versus Kevin Durant and them boys.
You the real MVP.
You won't want to be on his Journa hit list.
You don't want to make an enemy out of me. And I'm looking right into the camera. And I'm going to say it again. You do not want to make an enemy out of me. I'm not having it.
He's writing your fate, and he's up against a deadline.
So good. By the way, I did definitely mistake mnemonic MNE for mnemonic PNE. So for all of you who are deeply, deeply disappointed in yelling me, my deepest apologies for that grave error.
We kept it moving after that. People were very mad about it, though. They bombarded us with that correction.
Dan Le Batard.
Are you not alarmed by how much Stugatz ate last night?
Stugatz.
I had no idea. He ate a lot. He was pretty gross when I left. I had no idea that he went on this, like, grazing.
Well, here's the weird thing about Stugatz, too, though. When Stugatz eats here, he never finishes anything. I know because I'm always cleaning it up.
Oh, it's infuriating.
After he's left.
He eats one wing.
No, but
in case someone wants it, I mean.
Just eat the wing.
I thought Roy always ate the leftover wing.
Roy always throws it away.
All right, I'm a slub.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugatz on ESPN Radio.
So yesterday during the show, late during the show, Stugatz took an interest in something he usually doesn't take an interest in, which is a New York Times report, not bathing, no, a New York Times report about CTE in football players. They studied the brains, the New York Times, and this is, I think, is in conjunction with CNN. I'm not sure. 111 dead football players, and 110 of them had CTE, 99%. So what do you make of that, Sarah? Because I don't feel like this was much of a story yesterday, and I feel like this is subject matter that is cumbersome and hard to talk about thoroughly. And did the New York Times win a Pulitzer? Did Alan Schwartz and the New York Times win a Pulitzer when they really introduced all of us to the idea that football might be damaging brains if they didn't win a Pulitzer, they were certainly nominated and should have, because the reporting was fairly amazing. But what do you make? Are we numb on this by now? Do we now know, hey, these guys are injuring their brains, don't give me the numbers, just let me enjoy my Sundays?
I think a lot of people are like that. Yeah, I think a lot of people go with the old, they know what they're signing up for, so I don't really care if I'm watching them, damage their brain and disintegrate in front of us. I think this story, though, specifically, there's two elements of it. There's the 111 NFL brains, 110 of which showed CTE, and that was regardless of age or position. And then I think there were 287 or something like that total. So the other ones included CFL, high school, college, and a number of those, but not as high of a percentage, also showed CTE. It's self-selecting, which means that the person who volunteered before his death or the family of that person likely had some sort of inclination that there was something going on, and that is why. Or they're just interested in furthering the science on it. That doesn't necessarily mean that if you took the rest of the NFL that doesn't self-select and donate their brains, if they were forced to, that you wouldn't see the same percentage. We don't know that. But there is something to be said for the idea that if they already feel the symptoms or they think it might be going on, that they're more likely to donate. So it might not be true that 99% of all NFL players' brains will show that. It does give us an example of exactly how high the percentage is. And no matter how much we tell people this goes on, 99% is incredible.
Schwartz was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in 2011 for that piece.
I think if you start football right now or playing the NFL now, you obviously have to know. It's impossible not to know. What fascinated me about this was these are players who played decades ago. Ken Stabler, guys like that. And I do wonder, because I always said they had to know. But now I question, did they really know, and did the NFL keep it from them?
No, didn't know. They didn't know the extent of it. They couldn't have known the extent of it. You would have had a lot more of what you've already got happening now, which is guys are retiring early,
right?
Which isn't something that happened before. But let's talk about what Sarah said here, because I do believe you can dilute that number by saying what she said, which is this isn't exactly a scientific testing because all of these people are volunteering, which suggests that the family or they knew that there were problems involved. But the number is so high that I feel like I am willing to say the sample is so large and the number is so high. I think I'm willing to say flatly, yeah, that sport causes brain damage.
Right.
Period. Like no diluters, just not a comma, not anything. That sport causes brain damage.
Well, and there's a story out on the Huffington Post that someone sent me called Hooked for Life, inside the NFL's relentless, existential, big tobacco-style pursuit of your children. And in it describes the programs that they started to do with mothers, wherein they would very casually reference that they were working on better helmets and safety, would never mention CTE, would simply kind of graze over that so that they could say they acknowledged it while still pushing the sport on our youth.
Are you willing to say flatly, Stugatz, or am I saying something that's just obvious? Am I saying something that's simply obvious?
I think it's obvious at this point.
It's obvious now? Football causes brain damage. That's part of the deal. You sign the contract, that's what you're signing up for.
Well, we should ask Danny Cannell, because, right, there are still those that said that the science wasn't enough. There weren't big enough samples. We're still learning too much. You already thought that, but are there others who are still holding out?
I already thought it, but
10 out of 111 is not enough.
I already thought it, but I would be willing to adjust my thinking if you can provide for me facts that would force me to be open-minded. But these are not those facts. These confirm what I already thought. Like, in fact, didn't confirm what I already thought. These numbers are staggering to me.
Right.
I didn't think that I didn't think it'd be everybody. Right. I didn't think you'd be really lucky if you're the one. You'd be really mathematically lucky and defeating all of the probabilities and odds if you are simply the one person who doesn't have brain damage.
Hi, everyone. Stugatz here. Support for the Dan Le Batard Show podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, and your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Stugatz, STUGOTZ. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
Okay, Kevin, for the grand prize of $1 million, what color is the White House?
I know this.
5 seconds.
Oh, switching to Geico could save you a bunch of money on car insurance?
Okay. Judges? That's true, Kevin. They'll allow it. Congratulations. You're a winner.
Woo! Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Welcome aboard Delta Airlines. Please enjoy your flight and thanks for choosing Delta.
Jody Avirgan here. Thanks for listening to ESPN Films 30 for 30 podcasts from the producers of the award-winning 30 for 30 series. These new audio documentaries are an incredible collection of sports stories you need to hear to believe. It's really a win-win. Delta Airlines makes your travel experience easy and enjoyable with real-time bag tracking, e-boarding, and passport scanning during check-in. And ESPN's 30 for 30 podcasts make your in-flight time rich with stories that will keep you coming back for more. So sit back, relax, and keep listening to some of the most compelling sports stories ever told.
Dan Le Batard.
You're just allowed to give me one word on what you think. I tell you, American flag, you give me one word on what you think. Go ahead, Chris. You're only allowed one word.
Freedom.
That's what I was going to go with.
Stugatz.
Guillermo.
Bald eagles.
What?
2 words.
Well,
I mean, God, $2.
That's a fine.
$2. I mean,
That's a fine.
Do you realize how hard it is to be that bad with 2 words, man?
apple pie.
I got 2 words for you.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugatz on ESPN Radio.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Now you can test drive Snapshot even if you have insurance with another company. See how much you could save before you make the switch. Guest on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Here's your SportsCenter update. Infielder Eduardo Nunez was traded from the Giants to the Boston Red Sox on Tuesday night for minor league right-hander Sean Anderson and Gregory Santos. Cowboys rookie cornerback Jordan Lewis was found not guilty early Tuesday evening of 1 count of misdemeanor domestic violence and assault and battery. And finally, Justice League's extensive reshoots are causing headaches for its star schedules. Warner Brothers is approximately spending an astounding $25 million on the reshoots that have dragged on for roughly 2 months. Those stars like Ben Affleck and Gal Gadot aren't working on any other project at the moment, enabling them to be on call for filming. Henry Cavill, who plays Superman, has been scrambling to accommodate as he's been jumping between filming the new Mission Impossible and Justice League. Because of this, the mustache he grew for his character in the Mission Impossible sequel will have to be digitally removed after the Justice League reshoots because Paramount Pictures would not allow Cavill to shave it for Warner's reshoots. That's right. There's raw footage of Superman with a mustache.
Looks like Freddie Mercury.
For all the latest headlines and information, tune in to SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day.
Guillermo, put these things on the poll, please. Would you like to see raw footage of Superman with a mustache? Yes or no? And Stugatz mentioned that baseball trade. Would you like to see, because we get used to the idea of just up and trading someone. We get used to it. It's a normal thing in sports. Would you like to see it in the normal American workplace? That people can be traded, like I could be traded right now in the middle of just for another city,
right,
and another radio show, and they could bring in a new host here in normal different.
ESPN trades you for Don Lemon.
That's right,
right.
That's
and
right.
And there's footage of you just leaving after the show. We're all saying goodbye to you.
Right,
yes.
Right. Don't you? Would you like to see that in other workplaces? Just trades.
I'm just like all of a sudden at Breitbart.
Right. Yes, you just get traded. That would be an odd trade, an odd fit. I think everybody that was analyzing that trade would be like, that's an odd thing for Breitbart to be doing.
Stephen A. has a no trade clause.
Right,
I want
of
all
course.
of this. Yes.
Of course.
He can name his spots.
So you guys want this?
Yes.
In normal workplaces.
That would be hilarious, though, to see who can swing it. Like, because Stugatz would actually be good because he's so full of BS that you could send him to any job,
no doubt,
and he would just act like he is fully prepared for whatever the gig is.
But where would it be most inconvenient? Like you're going to your dentist, you get there, and they're like, "We're sorry, he's been traded to Des Moines."
Like in what profession?
Yeah,
you
like
mean?
where would it be most?
I would say I would be mad if my gynecologist.
Okay, not a problem I have. Yes, that would be a terrible thing to discover.
That would be bad.
Oh, hey, what's up? I'm Hal. I'm the new guy.
Right, exactly. Let's take a look.
All right,
let's pop open the hood. See what we're
this is awkward. No,
Guess we got to start from the beginning.
Yeah, you need an update on your
Or like,
phone.
what if it was your therapist and you've been with them for years and years?
And then you're going to break in the new one?
I think you won the game.
Oh, sorry.
You don't
One with gynecologist?
All
right.
You don't really need to go to a therapist after that. So Tony Baselli is mad about what we're saying here because he's a friend of the show and he's a meathead and he gets mad about everything I say. And some texters are denying the science of this. They're like, sorry, but that is not a scientific study. Those are brains that were donated by the family because they already thought the person had CTE, which Sarah mentioned. Another texter right in, do you not understand basic statistics? That was not a random sample of football players. They were former players who experienced bad symptoms of CTE. Okay, again, but it's
no, they weren't necessarily, actually. They didn't claim, it wasn't that they all had symptoms. What I said, which is noted in the study, is that it is self-selective, and that was noted. That doesn't necessarily mean they all had symptoms. It could also mean that they are just family members or people who have an interest in the science.
There's also some people, Dan, who are just never going to buy it because they love the thing that they're watching.
Right. Well, what did Baselli write you?
Baselli wrote in, here we go, annual CTE conversation. This is crap.
All right, there you go. So Baselli was the left tackle for there he is. Baselli's the left tackle for the Jacksonville Jaguars, a behemoth of a man, scary by any definition, and he disputes everything I'm saying. What's your problem with this study, Baselli?
Well, the ironic thing is I'm actually driving on I-10 to Tallahassee to go see my son plays football. I mean, how dare I let my kid play football? It's just a travesty that any parent would allow that to happen. I'm surprised, Dan, you can even watch football as much as morally conflicted you are.
Oh, no, I'm not morally conflicted. I know it's immoral to watch the cockfighting that I'm watching, but I enjoy it anyway.
Yeah, fair enough. I just think, number one, the studies around CTE, I mean, it's real, but they don't even know exactly how someone gets CTE. And they can't say scientifically there's a direct correlation between playing the game of football, concussions, and CTE. There's several things that could cause CTE that we do in our lives, lifestyle choices that we make. I'm not saying that football is the safest sport ever, but if you're going to start making that direct correlation between, football, concussions, and CTE, but you better throw in a bunch of other sports, lacrosse, women's soccer, hockey, a bunch of different things. And I just think it's irresponsible to say football is causing brain damage. I mean, that was the conclusion you came from.
Baselli, how can you argue those numbers though? All 111 NFL brains tested, 110 of them had CTE. Did we lose him? Did his phone line drop?
He's speechless.
He's just thinking? His brain doesn't work right because he played football and he's buffering?
Too soon.
Well, actually, I would be interested to know whether he'd be willing to donate his brain.
Still speechless.
By that point, he'd be gone, so he wouldn't have to deal with the repercussions of discovering that what he thought was a big joke and wasn't real was affecting him as well.
But how can you argue with these numbers? You can go ahead and try and undercut the science of the study if you want, but the numbers are too overwhelming. If all but one person tested had CTE, it's not 90%, it's not 80%. It's enough to be almost mathematically negligible.
They're nearly impossible to argue, but he did make a very good point about lacrosse, women's lacrosse, soccer. You look at the concussion rates in those sports, and no one's saying a thing about it. Now, we're not watching those and consuming those the way we are the NFL, but it's just as bad in some of those other sports.
I would not argue it's just as bad, and actually one of the things it says in the study is that it's not simply concussions. So it's not that concussions cause CTE. It's that damage to your brain can happen even when you don't sustain a concussion. So the difference is that you may sustain concussions in those other sports, but the repeated banging of your brain, the repeated hitting of your head is not consistent with the play in all those other sports, whereas in football, it is a significant part of the sport itself.
Stugotz, I don't believe that's a good point that he's making because, yes, you can also be concussed in the other sports, but it seems like it's more likely to happen in football than in anything that we're doing for our entertainment.
Other than boxing and MMA.
Other than boxing.
Right.
So wait a second, Dan. Hold on. First of all, my brain works. Barely, but it works. And I would donate my brain to study if there was a way to do it. And I guess I could do it post-death.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't. There's not a way to do it.
Not really helping your case.
Baselli,
my wife would like me to do it right now. She'd be for saying, donate your brain now.
I feel like you'd be making a better argument right now if you had donated your brain and scientists had put some facts in there.
That'd be good. That'd be good. I mean, maybe they can fix it. I don't know. But you talk about football. I read a report. Now, maybe it's not true. I don't believe half the crap what you read. You know, you got the Trump fake news stories out there. Who knows? But, you know, women's soccer has a higher concussion rate than football. So should we cancel that sport too?
They've actually made adjustments, though, to their sport that you can't have headers up until a certain age.
And Baselli, I don't want to cancel your sport.
But listen, it says right here in the study, linemen knock heads on most plays, and those who study brain trauma say the accumulation of seemingly benign, nonviolent blows rather than head-jarring concussions alone probably causes CTE. It's not just about the concussions in a sport, it's about the repeated activity, which in football is consistently knocking heads and blows.
Okay, so there's probably most likely ICT. Great. I mean, you look at other studies. I mean, I think the New York Times or some did a study of looking at people who played football, the game of football in, the 60s or something in their life, now as they're getting older, and it was better than the average person. You look at, depression rates among football players compared to the rest of society, and suicide rates, they're lower than the rest of society. And so I think we just jump to these conclusions, that football is causing, or sports that cause with contact are causing severe issues in people's lives. And I just don't buy that's the conclusion. I'm not going to jump to that conclusion yet.
But hold on a second, Tony. I don't want to cancel football. What I want to know is have all the facts in front of me about what it is that I'm watching. And I'm presenting these facts to you, and people like you are disputing. What are the facts?
I'm not disputing anything, Dan. You take a small sample size of a non-random or blind study. There's a lot of different things scientifically that people do before they jump to conclusions. I'm just saying the evidence. We're still accumulating evidence. I think we should. I think we should study people's brains. If there's a way to do it when they're alive, let's figure out better ways to protect people who play any contact sport, including football. So I'm not living in some world that says football is safe.
Tony,
and there's no risk to it.
Tony, what would I have to place in front of you? What are the facts I would have to place in front of you to change your mind? For you to be like, you know what, Dan, you're right. Everything that we're doing here is really hugely dangerous and reckless, and the league needs to be a lot more careful about the health of its players. Okay, first of all, I think the league is very careful now. Maybe not when I was playing or before. I think they're doing a lot now. That's the first thing. What would you have to do? I'm not one who's sitting in the camp of closing my eyes and going, la, 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 I can't hear you, ignoring the facts. I'm not saying there's not danger. There is danger in a lot of things we do, including football. To say that, though, there is a direct correlation to major risk for a guy to play football that is going to lead to higher rates of suicide, depression, and brain damage because of football, I'm not there yet because I don't see the studies that are saying that. Is there a risk? Yes. Do we need to continue to investigate to make this sport safer? Absolutely. But to jump to that conclusion where you go, not there yet. All right, we're out of time, unfortunately. We will argue again another day, sir.
Well, no, we'll do this again next year at this time.
Right, it's annual. He's right, it is annual.
Well, maybe we should make it biannual, guys.
July, we'll do it again in July. All right, talk to you next July, Tony. Thanks for calling.
Next July. See you guys.
Okay.
All I want to do is a zoom, 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 and a boom, boom.
I'm telling you, if I scroll back to my text from Baselli, I'll have that same text from him from last July. Yes.
We're about a week away from the Cleveland Indians logo back in the news.
Now, wait a minute. This was a study. It's a legitimate study that's in the news. I'm not making that stuff up. I didn't study the 111 brains.
It's just curious. It always comes up.
Sarah's got a good point.
Camp.
She wants to test the one guy who didn't test for CTE and see what he had going on.
Right. What's his secret? Maybe we could literally learn something about what prevents it. Does he have an extra thick skull? Does he have a larger layer of mucus between the skull and the brain? Like, what's going on with that guy?
He was a kicker.
No,
the kicker tested.
And so did the place.
One kicker and one punter.
Punter.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think Baselli and Gronk aren't, they're not applicable because their heads are running above everybody else's.
They're not normal.
Well, do you want to really quickly? There was a data compiled by researchers at Stanford. One college offensive lineman sustained 62 of these hits, those seemingly benign, nonviolent blows. In a single game, each one came with an average force on the player's head equivalent to what you would see if he had driven his car into a brick wall at 30 miles per hour. 62 of those in one game for one college offensive lineman.
It's tough to ask players who aren't feeling it, and the game means so much to them, and it's made their lives. It's really tough to ask the former players.
Looking for a new employee for your business? Let ZipRecruiter scout for you. They don't want it to be true, and I get that, but I think that Tony thinks I want it to be true, and I don't.
Well, and there's a medium ground, too, between they would be unhappy if they didn't play football versus they're only happy because they played football. What's in the middle there? Is it finding another job that makes you financially stable and otherwise?
To find us on a station near you, visit ESPN.com/ESPN Radio and click the station locator tab.
Don Le Batard. I'd like to be a dog, man. It seems like such a great lifestyle. You sleep all day, you wait for everyone to come home, they rub your belly, they take you for a walk, and they just throw treats at you.
Stugats.
I mean, I feel like you're kind of this show's pet, though, aren't you? Kind of. I mean, look at you today.
Who's good?
I mean, who's good? We groomed Stugats. Who's good? Who's good?
Who's good? This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
This conversation just took place. Sarah said to Stugats, this is how it took place. Sarah Spain said to Stugats, you have a giant booger in your right, and she started to finish it, nostril, and before she could finish it, Stugats' immediate response, not shamed, not defensive, do you want it?
Yeah. So does Clooney, by the way.
And then he picked it and then just sprinkled it like Salt Bae on desk in front of him in pieces, just to be ground up into his forearm hair for the rest of the day.
I do like when I get a good one, I do like rolling it around.
Oh my God, what's wrong with you?
Thumb and my index finger.
Stop.
Thumb and index. Mike, you got thumb and index?
Just stop.
Ew.
Get in touch with the show anytime to the 1-800-Flowers Twitter feed at Le Batard Show, at Stugat790, at Sarah Spain. It is time for Straight Talk. It is brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts.
Is there anyone in the world whose response to you have a booger in your right nostril is, before you can finish the thought, do you want it?
TJ Miller.
There you go. Keeping good company.
No.
He may join us again this week.
Nice.
Well, I wish it was today so I could ask him about how he said that women aren't funny.
TJ Miller is going to be in a Steven Spielberg movie. Ready Player One. I think he's a bad guy in a Steven Spielberg movie.
Didn't he walk that back, saying women aren't funny? Didn't he walk that back?
He attempted to walk it back, but only after he had said, also, in addition to women aren't funny because it's suppressed, which I actually think is an interesting conversation to be had if you're thoughtful about it. But then he said all they do is talk about their vaginas and go for shock jock jokes, which to me is a very lazy generalization. I also think if you said that any other category of human beings was inherently unfunny, people would be pretty mad at you. Like if you said all black people aren't funny,
right?
All Jewish people, all short people, all tall people, all fat people, all anybody except for women. But we keep having this conversation, and funny is subjective. So the idea that we've created a society in which we're supposed to think everything that men find funny is what's funny, and not that it's subjective, that what's funny involves your life experience and things that are interesting to you.
What's funny is what men find funny.
Right, like do you remember Christopher Hitchens in Vanity Fair? It was, women aren't funny because of childbirth. That's just so hard to go through that. They are not capable of being funny. Or they don't have to be funny to get laid, so therefore they're not. I mean, the dumbest examples all the time. And I'm not saying that there isn't some truth to the idea of it being suppressed and, not wanting women to be that way. But that's a conversation to be had that then you don't add on with every single woman just talks about her vagina.
That's pretty heavy. Yeah. I just like his voice. He sounds funny.
No, I think he's very funny. That's why I was disappointed.
I
was disappointed
and dig it.
that he...
Did he walk it back because he had to walk it back? Were people outraged?
People got mad because they went with the headline, which was TJ Miller says women aren't funny. Now, that's, of course, a clickbaity headline. Then you read further and you're like, okay, he's onto something here. We try to suppress it, blah, blah, blah. And then he just goes with the full lazy generalization. And then everybody in my mentions is like, well, Amy Schumer. And I'm like... Okay, well, is Andrew Dice Clay every single male comic? Why do men always have to be so raunchy? Why can't they be smart, right? I mean, it's just so stupid.
Did you guys see what Seth Meyers is doing these days? Because it's a good technique what he's doing on television. Hold on just a second.
I was hoping you were going to say, did you see this interview that TJ Miller gave? I got to find it, but it was amazing. He was just insulting the person that was interviewing him incessantly.
Yeah, I did see that.
While putting water in his face.
It was, it was on
that's
Vulture.
The same interview.
Yeah, after
do
talking,
you think you're good at your job?
Yeah. I'm going to read it real quick. After talking for, not that long, Miller gets antsy. He interrupts when I start another Silicon Valley question, and he asks, "Where are you from?" Then he makes small talk about my life for a few minutes, only to abruptly conclude by saying, "That was a trick. If you ask somebody about themselves in the middle of them asking about you, they're flattered and ask you nicer questions during the interview." Then, this time in the middle of a question about the risk of being relegated to bland Hollywood roles, he interrupts again. "Do you think you're good at your job?" he asked. "I don't think I'm great at it," I say. "I agree," he says, finishing another bottle of water and again crushing the empty. "That was another trick. By me asking that, you thought, is he playing a trick on me right now? And that made you feel like you were ahead of the game." He leans back in his chair, surveys the park, and says, "I wish we were doing this interview in a bar and not a gravel pit." At this point, so do I, and I suggest switching locations. He says no. You don't seem like the kind of guy who knows where the good bars are.
He doesn't respect constructs, and if you're going to be the guy who's an absurdist who doesn't respect constructs, then you probably shouldn't walk back that thing that's offensive. If you're that guy, because he is really someone who is testing the boundaries by not respecting the interviews, saying absurd
then
things.
be absurd.
Right.
Don't try to play half and half, because then after that he goes on his Twitter and tries to explain how he's just being progressive and thoughtful and we need to think about it differently. And then someone says to him, rudely I admit, "Listen, we don't need you to be progressive, you just need to be funny." And then he says, "You just need to be either nice or kill yourself." And I'm like, what? There's no excuse for the kill yourselves on. I mean, that's just
you don't want him walking that back. You want him to stay.
No, if you're going to be the absurdist, if you're going to do this as performance art, you're going to do an interview where you're being rude as part of the construct to the interviewer just because you don't respect the interview process. Then be out there with "women aren't funny" and take the bows and that come with that.
What is Seth Meyers doing?
Oh, it's so good.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. We'll get to that next.
Dan Le Batard.
People have told me before, when I was younger, that I looked like George Clooney. I'm serious. When I was younger.
Stugats.
You have a booger in your right nostril.
So does Clooney.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
Our thanks to Sarah Spain for being in with us today. Thanks to Sarah for being in on Highly Questionable all week. We will get to something she wants to talk about, which is butts in Miami, in just a second. But one last word, if I may, on this Stephen A. Smith, LeBron James stuff, because I think Sarah and I come from a different place than Stugats comes from. Mike, can you play just a couple of those sounds? First of all, Stephen A. Smith on Durant. Play that early so people have some context for the last time something like this happened, where Stephen A., who's a very big personality, was beefing with a very big personality in his sport.
You don't want to make an enemy out of me. And I'm looking right into the camera, and I'm going to say it again. You do not want to make an enemy out of me. I'm not having it.
And that was Durant, and now LeBron James is disputing what Stephen A. Smith is saying about him, if he'd be tempted to kick Kyrie's bleep if Kyrie were in front of him. Kyrie is coming back from China and putting Instagram posts on where he's singing "I'm Coming Home." People are assuming that he's making fun of LeBron James's commercials and coming home. That can't be coincidental, that's the song that he's singing as he's coming home.
Well, just on the way home from China. Don't we all do that?
It can absolutely be coincidental.
You think it's coincidental?
Yeah. It's like 180 from what you just said. It can absolutely be. LeBron doesn't trademark "I'm coming home."
Wait a minute.
Just because it was famously used in that commercial. He was using commercials before that.
You believe that Kyrie Irving is singing "I'm coming home" from China?
In a Snapchat.
In a Snapchat, and he's not doing that as part of something that mocks LeBron?
I think he's on a flight home from China, and that's a song about
Put
coming
it on the
home.
poll, Guillermo.
He is absolutely mocking.
Why didn't you go with "Leaving on a Jet Plane"? That's a real banger.
Like, put it on the poll, Guillermo. Kyrie singing "I'm coming home." Slight to LeBron or coincidence?
That's surprising that you would take that angle, because you're typically the guy that says, let's not read too much into things.
Right, but if you're putting it on a Snapchat and dramatically singing along, to me that feels like there's a reason for it beyond just the I'm flying home.
He knows he's in the center of everything. He knows even from China that he's in the center of the entire American sports news stream.
I'm with you, man. I've never been prouder of you. It's really not your character, though. Mike is right.
Stugotz is your ally at this point.
Oh, no.
Regardless, whether it's a coincidence or not, that's not the ally I want, obviously.
It's the ally you got.
But let me ask you this can we agree with this portion of it? That here is LeBron James here is Stephen A. Smith saying of LeBron James challenging his news story. Here is Stephen A. Smith coming back at LeBron James.
Was I wrong when I broke the story that he was going to South Beach? Was I wrong when I talked about how I'm hearing he's going back to Cleveland? I just refused to believe it because who the hell would want to leave South Beach? But I am hearing he's going back to Cleveland. What if I got into the real story about what happened with LeBron James against Boston the year before or that spring when he finally decided to leave Cleveland and take his talents to South Beach? But we don't want to get into that.
Well, we do, but what I would say, this is what I would say. That is absolutely entertaining. It ain't journalism. That is the place where ESPN finds itself that is tricky. Threatening to say something that you know because a source have questioned your...
Right.
That's just not journalism. Like, it's entertaining to listen to, but that ain't journalism.
He's walking a fine line. Stephen A. himself.
ESPN is walking that fine line.
Stephen A. is, I think you would hold him up front and center as saying, here, okay, this is representative of what ESPN is going through right now between entertainment and journalism. And Dan,
for a long time, not now.
Yeah, for a long time.
I don't view those as threats. They're empty threats. He's never going to reveal that stuff. The second he starts revealing that stuff is the second people stop giving him the information.
That's not professional.
But could we sell that fight?
It's a way of entertaining.
Could we sell that fight? That's the real question. If he was being serious.
But the same people, Stugotz, that object to the things that ESPN does are embracing this because it's entertaining, and it's not journalism. That's not how journalists behave. It's simply not. I don't have any precedent for it. And I say this again, you guys think I'm criticizing Stephen A. No, I'm getting left behind. This is where ESPN is in 2017, and my old school journalism school sensibilities do not apply. They get trampled by entertaining. They get trampled by them, and I will lose. So this is it's not a criticism of Stephen A. It is telling you what is so about ESPN and Stephen A. because it's not something I've ever seen before. Right. When have you ever seen anybody, even Cosell, when have you ever seen threatening things that you're going to report on an athlete in something that feels like blackmail?
I haven't seen it, but
it's professional wrestling.
And it's not just ESPN, though. It's everywhere. It's the whole marketplace.
I haven't seen it, but I'm glad I'm seeing it now. I know you guys have a problem with it. I don't, because for me, it is endlessly entertaining.
I don't have a problem with it because some sort of tisk wagging your finger at it. I just worry about the larger consequences of us losing the lines between what we believe to be factual and what is put out there by sources without real. And I'm not saying Stephen A. Stephen A. is on the side of sourcing his material and having it be correct. I'm saying the larger change in the entire landscape worries me to the point I mentioned earlier, where some people are incapable of knowing the difference between a random website that has zero facts and zero sources and is literally just made up in order to stir people's opinion one direction, and actual websites that use sources and journalistic standards. When we lose that and there's no difference between the two, that's how we get into an issue where we have completely false things pushing a narrative in one direction. That's dangerous.
It's over.
That's totally fair.
It's over. We lose. Old journalism is dead. Like, we lose. It's over. The things that you're lamenting, I'm not talking about just sports journalism. The things that Sarah has lamented, she is Don Quixote on. It's dead. It's over.
So
it's
I won.
2017. Stugotz wins.
Yes.
Well, we all lose.
We all lose.
We all lose.
Stugotz wins.
Big winner.
Nothing matters, and we all lose.
Uncle Fuddy, you look good. When you back that ad up.
That's a good point, though. Like a light went off there when you said that, because I could report anything right now about how someone's feeling, and there is, I mean, a lot of people would not believe me, but some people would. Oh, he works for ESPN. I don't know who that guy is.
The whole thing is so muddled. Yeah. Like, you've always had to, in some form or another, you've always had to be some form of discerning. But we are now at a point where you don't believe what you don't believe what anybody's saying about anything. Like, there's so much bleep that's been thrown against the wall that it becomes hard to know what's the truth on anything. And then the responsibility of knowing what the truth is isn't with the provider of the truth that makes the business in truth. Right. The responsibility of the truth is in the reader who doesn't know the difference between what's the truth and what's not.
In fact, the providers are sometimes being paid to intentionally mislead. There was a guy who did an interview who was making tons of money based off creating stories that were plausible enough to sound real, but that were completely false.
It's sports being a microcosm for everything that's happening in the
Mike
American
Ryan's
media.
like, enough.
Yeah. Well, he was tired of this.
More
like,
shoots.
Yeah,
toilet shoots that inexplicably have water.
Dan Le Batard.
What is happening right now with you and Bob Dylan is you're disrespecting everything the man has done in his career because he hasn't served you at sleepaway camp.
He doesn't interact with anyone at the camp.
I know, but
in fact, I just learned he hasn't been to visiting day in 2 years. I mean, go visit your kid.
Stugats.
You send your kid away for 7 to 8 weeks over the summer, and you get to see him or her once per summer for 24 to 48 hours. Go check out your kid. Go hang out with your kid. And the voice is overrated. The writing is fantastic. The voice is overrated.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
It feels like everyone here is tired of me talking about journalism, but Stephen A. Smith has objected to what I said, so he's going to join us in 15 minutes to talk about our disagreement. He says he's watching and he disagrees, and I wonder if he sees as he's watching and is confused that right behind Stugats there is a artist rendering of Stephen A. Smith painted blue in reference to him talking about his oatmeal and blueberries. We delighted in the musical nature of Stephen A. Smith coming off a vacation to rip Phil Jackson, and we delighted in the musical nature of the word blueberries.
Brown sugar, some blueberries. My God! Ah!
House music.
A little bit of brown sugar. My God! Some blueberries. A little bit of brown sugar. Ah!
It is good. His face is made to look like blueberries in there. I wonder if he's confused by that. He'll be on with us in 10 minutes.
It looks like a cereal box.
Yeah.
Looks delicious.
It does. It looks like that cereal. The Stephen A. Smith blueberry cereal does look delicious.
Yo, that'll start your day off with a kick.
So we will talk to him in 10 minutes, but what do you got for us on butts in Miami? What do you want to...
Okay, this is a non-scientific thing that I've discovered by being here for longer than, like, just at night. I usually fly in, I go to sleep, I wake up, I do the show, I fly out. But I've been wandering around. Yesterday I took like a 2-hour walk for exercise. I was walking around. And butts here are so big and so fake. And I've always wondered, when it comes to fake boobs, and I presume that some of you have had experience with those, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, so don't volunteer yourself as someone who has experience if the significant other in your life doesn't know that you do. With butts, is it the same as boobs where you don't care that, like, there's something foreign sewed underneath someone's skin and that's what you're grabbing? Because that's weird to me. If I was a guy, I think fake boobs can look nice.
Right.
But then when you're actually touching them, do you think it's weird that there's something sewn and then like just underneath someone's body skin?
I do. I hate fake boobs. I do.
Are you saying that because your wife doesn't have fake boobs?
My wife does not have fake boobs. I have been with women who have fake boobs. I do not like, before I was married, but I don't like them. I don't like how they feel.
Okay, all right, very good. Not where I expected this conversation to go.
I've just always wondered. Does that weird you out?
Well, no. The phenomenon itself was confusing to me the first time I discovered it, because Miami per square foot has to have more fake butts than anywhere in America. Has to.
Right.
And so it confused me, because imagine discovering this.
Right.
Imagine having no information whatsoever.
Right, you just think it Spanx, and then they take off it's still there like that.
And so it was really confusing. And in South Florida, we have the added bonus of people sometimes try and do that on the cheap. So you get doctors being arrested for doing that in a warehouse with Fix-A-Flat. That's something that actually happens. Yes.
That's awful.
There's been someone imprisoned in Miami for using Fix-A-Flat on the fake butt. But the entire fake butt phenomenon is confusing to me. Perhaps it shouldn't be. Maybe I'm just normalized to fake breasts in South Florida. The fake butt phenomenon is totally confusing to me, because imagine the first time. Imagine you've got no information whatsoever on this existing. And then the next thing you know, so you're spending most of your time in South Florida, as I do. 94% of my waking time is spent real or fake.
Right. That's what I was doing. I was walking down like the Lincoln Road Mall or whatever it is, and I just kept seeing these giant butts that didn't move. They just like breasts were like up there, just like high and tight and up there, no movement. And then the rest of the body is so small. And I know that some people actually genetically have like very thin body and a giant.
We are built differently down here,
for
too.
sure. And and then that's what I was
the other
looking
thing
at.
that makes it
so I was
confusing.
trying to figure out, is this the natural body type of which some people have? But then some of them, it was so obvious, and they were so weird looking because they didn't move when they walked.
Right. That's right.
And I just am wondering, when you're grabbing that, a big handful of butt, which I'm doing now, sorry for the visual, or the other way around.
I don't have any experience with that. I don't know. I've never
I heard it could be very confusing. A friend of mine told me.
Are you familiar with Pebbles the model? Is she the one who
She's
got
still in
arrested?
jail.
Is she the one who got arrested? Go ahead and Google
Friend
search.
of the show.
Friend of the show,
Oh,
Pebbles
There's
DA,
a D in
the
Pebbles.
model.
Yeah.
Go ahead and Google Pebbles the model, and we'll just wait for Sarah Spain's natural reaction.
It's Dr. Pebbles D'Amato.
Imprisoned.
Hi, everyone. Stu Gatz here. Support for the Dan Le Batard Show podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, and your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Stugatz, STUGOTZ, equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Longtime listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, you know, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.
You should call them.
I will.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Welcome aboard Delta Airlines. Please enjoy your flight, and thanks for choosing Delta.
Jody Avirgan here. Thanks for listening to ESPN Films 30 for 30 podcasts from the producers of the award-winning 30 for 30 series. These new audio documentaries are an incredible collection of sports stories you need to hear to believe. It's really a win-win. Delta Airlines makes your travel experience easy and enjoyable with real-time bag tracking, e-boarding, and passport scanning during check-in. And ESPN's 30 for 30 podcasts make your in-flight time rich with stories that will keep you coming back for more. So sit back, relax, and keep listening to some of the most compelling sports stories ever told.
Dan Le Batard.
You are the best, and when I say the best, I mean the very worst and most evil.
Stugatz.
The worst.
But this time, it's for real.
Worst.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugatz on ESPN Radio.
Our thanks to Sarah Spain for sitting in with us. Stephen A. Smith has objected to something that I was saying, and I will preface this, as I always do with Stephen A. Smith, whenever I am critical of anything or disagree with an opinion. Stephen A. Smith is an exceptional journalist, and what I think has happened here with the Kyrie Irving, LeBron James story has gone one step beyond what old journalism used to be.
Let me tell the audience what Stephen A. actually tweeted out. Hey, at Dan Le Batard Show. It's actually at Le Batard Show. I'm watching. I respectfully disagree with how you're characterizing things, but we'll talk.
Okay, so now we're going to talk. Stephen A., thank you as always for joining us. What happened? What are you objecting to?
Well, first of all, hello, Sarah. How are you? Make sure to say thank you. Here's the deal.
Doing well, thanks.
You talked about yeah, exactly, Stu, as well. Here's the deal. I'm used to talking to both of y'all. I'm not used to Sarah being there. That's why I said Sarah. Okay, so here's the deal. When you talk about it overstepped the line. It's entertaining, but it isn't journalism. What are you talking about? Because to me just making a statement in the throes of spewing out an abundance of information that I've been reporting on all weekend, I don't understand where the absence of journalism is.
Oh, no, the information is absolutely journalism. It's the next step of threatening to reveal information you already have.
Well, let me say this to you. I respectfully disagree that I made a threat. If you replay what I said is I could talk about X, Y, and Z, but we're not going there. I didn't sit there and say I will do it if you push me. I don't do that. I would never reveal anything that I'm not supposed to reveal. I would never sit up there and cross that line. Covering the NBA as an insider for in excess of 15 years, I would never do something like that to any player, coach, owner, executive, or anybody else. But I'm saying if I'm talking about a particular subject who suddenly, because he has this insatiable appetite to manipulate and control narratives, doesn't find himself to be successful in that regard, and as a result he wants to attack the credibility of somebody reporting on it, I'm simply sitting there and reminding him, excuse me, you know what I know. You know how I know. You've had something to do with what I've known on occasions. What are you talking about? That's what I'm saying. That's not threatening somebody. That's reminding them, excuse me, fall back. Know what your place is. Know where you stand. You know what you did. You know who told me what and why. You know that you're one of the individuals. Those are one of the individuals that you want to speak on your behalf because you want to keep a healthy distance so you have plausible deniability, which is something players, coaches, executives, and others have been exercising in this industry for decades. Dan Le Batard is an outstanding journalist and columnist from Miami. There is no highly questionable if it wasn't for your exceptional work in Miami. There is no nationally syndicated radio show if it were not for your exceptional work with the Miami Herald. You know this business, and you know what comes with it. And you know good and damn well that there are many, many occasions where people reach out to you, whether it's directly or through intermediaries, to make sure they convey something to you. They don't turn around and then question your credibility to cover their own you-know-what. That's what I'm saying. That's not threatening to do anything.
No, but all of
that's
that,
reminding them,
but Stephen
hey,
A.,
that's what it is.
No, but all of what you just said is fine. Everything that you just said, well, LeBron fall back, probably not something we should be doing. But
know
okay.
your place, maybe not.
Yes, it is, Stephen A.
But all of what you said is fine. But it seems like a semantics argument to me to say it's not actually a threat when we've got the tape of you saying to Kevin Durant, you don't want to make an enemy out of me. That feels like a threat.
Wait a minute. You did not bring that up when you were talking about LeBron James. If you sit up there and you say that about Kevin Durant, I concede that. Why did I say that about Kevin Durant, though? Kevin Durant called me a liar. He attacked me as a person. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not going for that. Who do you think you are? You were with me 4 months earlier in 40-40. You say your mother never speaks, that your mother's been on my show several times. You say your brother never spoke to you. Your brother wanted to tour ESPN. Your business managers, your confidants, all of these people have spoken to me. What are you talking about? You were filming a commercial in L.A. You told individuals you're thinking about going to L.A., but no matter what, you're probably going to leave OKC. I did not talk about you on a personal level. I did not attack you. I didn't talk about your mama or anything like that. I said that if things don't work out in OKC, you may leave. You called me a liar, and I ended up being true. And all I'm saying is, if you're going to go that route, I'm showing you that I have a platform where I'm not going to back up from you. If words hurt you before, imagine what I could do now. Because you've given us the
answer. That feels like a threat.
Let him go.
Guys, you're not understanding me. You're not understanding
Stephen A., I'm understanding everything you say.
I'm conceding that you were right about Kevin Durant.
Okay, so
I'm saying
Durant,
that's not what I did with LeBron.
Okay, all right. Listen, you won round one. You also won round two, and I speak on behalf of this entire show, except for Sarah and Le Batard. I love you.
I love
You are the greatest ever.
The greatest ever. The greatest of all time.
I love him too. Don't put me in a position where I look like I'm not loving Stephen A. appropriately.
Hey, listen. I disagree with Dan Le Batard a lot, but that's my brother. We're tight. It's all good. All I'm saying is I'm not refuting what your description was of Kevin Durant. That's obvious. I was just explaining why. In the case of LeBron James, I did no such thing. I specifically said, look, there are things that happened in 2010 that I could have discussed, but we're not going there.
But don't you think by saying that, you're essentially waving it out there in a sort of
you are
blackmail
waving
type
it,
of
you're
way?
waving it out.
You're saying, look, I'm not going to say it, but I could.
All of that other stuff in the background is hard for me to decipher over the phone.
They love you. No, they're celebrating you and yelling at me and Sarah.
I'm just saying. But to get back to what you said, Sarah, I can understand it. But what I'm saying to you is this, Sarah, I watched you on television. I watched you going
not talking
at
about me.
No, I'm not. Just listen to my point.
Okay.
I watched you basically undress Derrick Rose, especially at that time when Derrick Rose was talking about how he couldn't play because he was worried about walking his kids down the aisle for graduation or whatever it was when they turned 18 years of age. I'm saying to you, if somebody turns around and they're attacking your level of credibility, which is firmly established, spanning decades, you sitting there and saying, excuse me, there are an abundance of things that I could talk about that would even have elevated my cachet and validity even more, but I didn't do it. All I'm saying is that's not a threat. That's not a threat. That's all I'm saying.
It seems like semantics a little bit to me. I understand. No. Let me say something really quick. I understand the point, though, that he's making, which is that there are instances where you can say, if you would want me to further prove that I know what I'm talking about, it would require me to say things off the record or things that I don't feel comfortable sharing. That's
Correct.
totally valid, and I understand his point. And what I said about Derrick Rose not wanting to be like feeling bad 18 years later after signing this giant contract, I stand by. I think that was a really dumb thing for him to say.
You're absolutely right.
Right, and I disagree with Dan that this felt less like, oh, I'm not going to say these things because that wouldn't be right, versus like I could say them and I'm using it against.
Hold on a second. First of all, let's just go down this path, though, with Stephen A. Smith, because he is an old-time journalist who has had to evolve and make changes in new-time journalism. And what we were talking about as we examined the journalism, Stephen A., is that I've never seen what you did in either instance to Kevin Durant or LeBron James. In my history covering sports, I've seen reporters get their back up because their integrity is questioned. I've never seen them react the way that you reacted, which is to say, you better be careful because I'm on your level and you attack my integrity and I've got stuff that I can come back on you on.
We live in different times, in a different age with the advent of social media and beyond, folks. And what has happened is because these guys don't necessarily feel the need to communicate directly with pundits, commentators, media members, et cetera, because they have their own voice. Sometimes they think they can say and do anything, even though they're the ones accusing us of malicious intent and things of that nature. I happen to resent that because I don't think that's the case. If you listen to what I said yesterday in regards to LeBron, I prefaced my comments by saying whether it's me, it's Adrian Wojnarowski, it's Chris Broussard, it's Mark Spears, the list goes on and on. As journalists, we always know more than we actually say. You, Dan Le Batard, epitomizes that. You come on the airwaves every day. You talk about stuff, particularly in Miami. Who knows the Heat? How many people know the Miami Heat inside and out better than Dan Le Batard? Don't tell us that you've said everything. If Pat Riley and the Miami Heat suddenly stand up and say, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, knowing all the things that you know, you might come on the air and say, excuse me, we know better. You need to watch your mouth. Now, you're not telling them if you don't watch your mouth, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. But what you are saying to them, excuse me, I don't know. I don't know. You don't know that I know?
Stephen A., I would not ever say, hey, Pat Riley, get in your lane, watch your mouth, stand down.
Oh, I'm sorry. If Pat Riley attacked you as an individual and as a professional and attacked your professionalism, I think you would. I could be wrong, but I think you would.
You would. Stephen A. Stephen A. Stephen A. Stephen A. The GOAT. Stephen A. Blueberries.
What'd you have for breakfast? What'd you have for breakfast?
Can I say this to y'all? Let me just say this to y'all. Let me just put it out clear as day. I'm a human being first. I'm never going to cross lines and be unethical and unprofessional. I'm always going to strive to be that to the best of my ability. But I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not backing up from these people. I do what I do. When I say stay in your lane, I'm not saying stay in your place like it's a lesser place than me. I'm saying, LeBron James, you are a superstar basketball player. Be that dude. Stop losing in the finals. Handle your business. You do you, I'll do me. But that's all it's going to be. I'm not backing up. If I praise this guy 99% of the time with the stuff that comes out of my mouth, they are praiseworthy, laudables, according to LeBron James. The second you put him in a position where he doesn't feel like he's controlling the narrative, I find that he starts opening his mouth and chirping, whether it's whispering quietly or taking indirect shots, being passive-aggressive or whatever the case may be. I kind of think that he tends to go at it like that. I did not like it yesterday or the day before, and I addressed it, but I did not threaten that man. All I said was, you know that there's a whole bunch of stuff that we could say that we don't say. Don't get in the business of trying to attack people's credibility when you know there's skeletons in your closet just like everybody else. Fall back in that regard, and I stand by that.
Stephen A. Stephen A. Stephen A. Stephen A. Stephen A.
Blueberry.
Stephen A.
Blueberry.
Stephen A.
Blueberry.
I gotta go, y'all.
Don Lebatard.
When's the last time you were that angry or passionate about something?
Never.
Ever. Never seen Dan.
Never in my life. I've never cared about anything or anyone the way that he cares about it not being the United States of Tortorella.
Stugats.
He has to be taking all kinds of pills, right?
No. Man, what are you doing there? That is reckless use of the microphone.
Well, the blood pressure has to be high, does it not?
Put it up on the poll. At Lebitard Show, did Guillermo just accuse Stephen A. Smith of pill popping? Yes or no? That is really efficient, disastrous use of the microphone right there.
This is the Don Lebatard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
Texter writes in, Stephen A. just popped you in the blueberries, bruh.
Yep.
Stay in your oversized lane. We all enjoyed that. I think we all did. I think Sarah also enjoyed that. And if some of you are ending up in a place where you think that I'm against Stephen A. Smith, you've got it wrong. I like to celebrate our differences because we're not anything alike in the way that we do this. And furthermore, I'll say that his way of doing it is more rewarded in 2017 than my way of doing it. My whole damn staff just turned against me.
Yeah. Although you've been rewarded pretty nicely here for what
I know, but what I'm saying is that's the way to go. The way to go in 2017 is the Stephen A. Smith bombast. Your information's solid, and you will defend it against anybody, no matter how powerful they are. It's just not, all of that is just not my style.
It's a lethal combination. It's why he's the greatest going right now. He has the information, he has the credibility, he has the delivery, he's very entertaining, and he's going to win. He wins arguments even when he's on the wrong side of it.
You're witnessing greatness every time he puts his voice on anything.
Yeah.
He's the greatest ever to do it.
It's kind of like LeBron, actually. Don't take it for granted while you've got it.
Yeah. But what just happened there, though, is, I mean, there were a lot of words. It was a threat. Like, you could do a lot of words to say it's not a threat.
Yeah, there was redirecting towards Dan is a great reporter and you're the reason HQ exists, and Sarah said some great things about Rose, and none of those things have anything to do with the threats that I keep making. But if I talk around them enough, then people will forget what the point of the conversation is. He's
bleeped off. He's mad that somebody would attack his credibility, and I get that. But what I'm saying is it's often the side, it's been the case in my career that even if you're on the right side of that, on having your integrity impugned, the reaction of the journalist is not that.
But he said he's wrong on Durant, and I said this earlier, Dan. They're kind of like empty threats. Like you have to read through that. He's entertaining. Like LeBron got him to a very hot place, and he's saying, "Hey,
in the history of journalism, in the history of journalism, why am I discussing this with you? Give me all the people who make empty threats publicly."
Stephen A.
Like.
He did admit that he was wrong with Kevin Durant, while also admitting that Kevin Durant deserved it, which I enjoyed immensely.
Yeah.
All right, we've got to get it. We're never going to get to this Seth Meyers thing. What are we doing here next, Sarah? This guest, who is this person that we're talking to next?
His name is Kevin Brilliant. He's a behavioral economist out of Duke who works for the Bulls, really young guy who I saw speak at the Global Sports Management Summit. And he gave this just incredibly interesting talk about using the principles of behavioral economics to decide decisions for stuff like game day operations. What lines do you use, and why do people think in one way that this line is actually better for them when, as it turns out, it takes longer, but they leave more satisfied? The peak end theory of, does the game really end when it ends, or does it end when you've left the parking lot and you've gotten home, and then you decide whether it's worth going back again based on how long it took you to get out of there and get home and all this other stuff, and how there's all these aspects about our own lives and the way our brains work that we don't recognize, but that they do, and they're using that to decide how to cater to our sports needs.
Right in my wheelhouse.
Don Batard.
I figured that she absolutely had changed a tire. Like, I just figured that she was capable of doing manly things like that.
Well, it's very heteronormative to assume that that's a manly thing, but also I'm not that good at things that are useful.
Stugats.
Let me backtrack for a second. Did you actually say thank you when she accused you of being heteronormative? Just using
it felt like a compliment.
It was not a compliment.
I forgot about the big words.
I thought you were a comedic genius.
She accused you of basically just using stereotypical biases, and your response was thank you.
This is the Don Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
Kevin Brilliant with us. He's a behavioral economist. This is subject matter that's complicated. So, Kevin, let's see if we can make this bite-sized for people. Thank you for joining us. Behavioral economist, what the hell is that?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, guys. Behavioral economics is the study of the non-conscious biases and hidden forces that shape our judgment and decision-making. So at any given point in time, sort of like 95% of human cognition happens at a non-conscious level. Basically, there's all this information out there in the universe that we're trying to process simultaneously. And so we have to develop these heuristics or shortcuts for distilling down an incredible amount of information into something we can manage on a moment-to-moment basis. Oftentimes, this leads to biases in our judgment and decision-making that take place outside of our awareness. And so behavioral economics seeks to understand what those are, and in the context of sports, how teams can use that to create a better fan experience.
How and why are the Bulls using you? How did they come upon you and decide to use you?
Yeah, it was sort of right place, right time. They were looking for someone to fill a role in their business strategy and analytics group independent of behavioral economics. And it just so happened that while I was in grad school at Duke, I had the good fortune to study in the lab of Dan Ariely, who's one of the leading behavioral economists in the world. And when I got here and started interviewing, I found out that Michael Reinsdorf, our team president, his favorite author is Dan. So it was sort of this convergence of circumstances that sort of worked out perfectly.
So I had you on my podcast, and it was 45 minutes of brilliance, Stugats. Real name, Kevin Brilliant.
I have questions about that. We'll get to them in a second.
And and obviously this is shorter, but give us an example of one of the ways that you've actually used this in practice for the Bulls.
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about in your podcast was that a foundational study in behavioral economics is around the concept of choice paralysis. Basically, an economist would tell you that more options is always to the benefit of the chooser, or at least it's net neutral. If it's a bad option, it'll simply be discarded. But what we know from behavioral economics is that you can overwhelm people with too many choices. And so the foundational study is essentially they did one version where they sold 6 jams in supermarkets, and on the second day they sold 24. And not only did they sell way more jams when they only offered 6 options, but people were overwhelmingly more satisfied because they didn't have sort of what's called a counterfactual, or the mind's ability to imagine how something might have played out differently. They were just satisfied with what they chose. And so when I walked into our team store when I first got here, I looked at our wall of hats and I looked at our retail manager and I said, how many different versions of New Era hat do we sell? The answer is 108.
And I know how we got there. We said if we offer people more options, they'll be more satisfied with what they choose and more likely to find something that fits their need. And I don't think it's a bad thing that we offer a lot of options. In fact, I think it can be quite good. But if you're going to do that, you need to offer people instructions on how to start their process. So Amazon does this particularly well with this is the most popular option, or people like you also buy. So I was just down in our team store right before this, and I looked at our wall of hats, and I noticed that they'd strategically grouped colors together. So similar types of hats were grouped together. And so all of a sudden, instead of having to evaluate 108 different options, your first screening process is, okay, which color among the 6 or 7 do I prefer? Let me start there. And I also noticed that instead of just displaying one shelving unit per hat and then replacing it when it ran out, for the most popular hats, they displayed it in multiple places on the hat rack, which is what's called social proof. It's basically a signal to the decision maker that other people have made this choice. And we typically like to use information about what others do because at the very least we can't look foolish making that decision.
Are you someone who is working on court product, or are you just working with their business side?
No, exclusively with the business side and fan engagement.
Okay, so it's fan engagement. So what's something you've learned other than that? What's something that you have learned that you've gotten there, if you're allowed to cover this sort of ground, where you've changed something like that and you've gotten a vastly different result because you are applying behavioral economics?
Yeah, so one of my favorite studies is around the peak end effect. This is something Sarah and I talked about on our podcast. It comes from a study that Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize for Behavioral Economics, did with colonoscopies. And I won't go into too much detail, but basically in one version he did 30 minutes of the natural colonoscopy, and in the second version he did 30 minutes of the procedure, and then he left the device in for 5 unnecessary minutes that was unnecessary to the procedure. If we were perfectly rational beings, an unnecessary 5 minutes of a colonoscopy would never be a good thing. But because compared to the rest of the experience, it was by far less invasive, the way that people remembered back on the experience was more favorable than in the condition where they had less of the colonoscopy.
Because the last 5 minutes, they weren't doing anything with it. It was just sitting in there versus shoving around.
That's exactly right. And so the peak end effect is basically that we disproportionately remember the peak of an experience and the end of the experience. So much so that that's what stands out in our minds when we reflect back on whether we had a good time at something like a sporting event. So we were at this behavioral science and sports roundtable that Dan and I put together about 1.5 years ago, and a guy by the name of Mike Norton, who's also done follow-up research to this study, raised the question, why do teams give out their promotional giveaways or bobbleheads at the beginning of the experience? He said, you're already at your emotional apex. You have to carry that thing around now for 2 hours. Wouldn't you be better giving something to someone as they're leaving so that it's the last thing they remembered? And he based this on a study that he conducted with the DoubleTree Hotel. Basically, they were giving away warm chocolate chip cookies when you checked in. All of a sudden, he flipped it and gave it to people when they checked out, and satisfaction went through the roof. And so in the context of...
I thought I was just buying hats. You guys are tricking me. You guys are actively tricking... You're bleeping with my subconscious on everything at the arena.
No, I mean, and actually that's an important point, is that people could use behavioral economics or an understanding of psychology for the wrong reasons, I suppose.
And I'm sure some are.
I'm sure some are, but the people who I had the good fortune to study under and work with, you use behavioral science and an understanding of psychology to create better experiences for people, even in cases where they wouldn't be able to consciously tell you, this is what's driving my level of happiness with the team.
Right, and that's something we actually talked about on the podcast. I said people know now that everything is being studied. I just read a story that Roombas are now going to start giving the floor plans of people's houses to the highest bidder because they've started to get programmed to actually know where they go in your house. We know that that's happening with everything, so we're so suspicious that Kevin could tell us we're doing this so that in the end you're happier, and we'll be like, we don't like it.
Right.
We don't like that you're inside our heads in a way we don't understand.
Amazon's going to figure out how to do all this stuff so that you're buying things that you don't even need or want just because they're tricking you into buying things you don't need or want. Stugatz has a question. Go ahead.
So what's your real last name?
It actually is brilliant. We thought it might have got changed at Ellis Island by a guy who just had a really great night the night before, but it actually turns out to be real.
What's your real last name, Wiener?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Wiener.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Brilliant. Kevin Brilliant, again, behavioral economics for the Bulls, economist, for the Bulls. You can check him out on Sarah Spain's podcast. Where can they get your podcast?
It's called That's What She Said with Sarah Spain. You can find it everywhere, iTunes, ESPN app, etc.
Kevin, thank you for being on with us. We appreciate it.
It was great to be on. Love the show, guys.
Thank you. Not surprising, we're getting a lot of this. Behavioral sleeponomics.
I hit send on that.
Don Le Batard.
Did you know that Jose Canseco's finger fell off during a poker game?
We did a good show today, man.
68% of the audience said no. That's all we got today.
Is that all?
Our job is done.
Stugats.
That's a quality program we put together.
Good job, everyone.
This is the Don Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
What if I told you that the greatest Olympic champion is desperate for attention? That he spent months promoting a race against a shark? That the attention grab worked and got many people to tune in to watch his race? That if I'm being perfectly honest, I only watched to see him get eaten alive? That, surprise, he didn't actually race a shark. That the only sharks that coward raced were computer-generated. That this shouldn't be a surprise considering his past. That this is the same guy who once made international headlines for hanging up on the show because he didn't get a joke about cereal boxes at a nightclub.
Sorry, I think we have to head to the next interview, but sorry, thank you very much for your time.
That he doesn't know how to hang up a phone.
That was ridiculous.
That his infamously thin skin wouldn't stand a chance against the bite of a real shark. ESPN Films presents a 30 for 30 about Michael Phelps, former Olympic champion, current sideshow fraud, who conned the Discovery Channel into paying for his vacation to the Bahamas.
I think it was South Africa, wasn't it? Oh, whatever.
Sound of the day is brought to you by Dollar Shave Club. Upgrade to shaving with a fresh blade whenever you want for a fraction of the price. Join DollarShaveClub.com today.
Texter writes in, I can appreciate smart and mind-broadening guests, but this behavioral cat is peddling minutia-based snake oil. Do better.
Snake oil. That's an interesting take on that.
Another guy writes in, not thinking behavioral economics is interesting is admitting that you are a sheep and are okay with that. Open your damn mind for once in your life. Well, we've got this constant tension around here between smart and stupid. And Roy spent the entire interview, for some reason, reading about the 1992-1993 Toronto Maple Leafs.
The season recap. Yeah.
I don't know.
They were in the Western Conference back then, weren't they?
Yeah.
Roy was bored.
Season, yeah.
And Guillermo spent the whole break ripping this behavioral economy.
Well, I think that commenter was spot on. If you want to be a sheep and have no idea what your non-conscious brain is making you do, then you can do that. Or you could be interested in the idea that there are so many choices that we make every single day without even realizing why we're making them. And are they the best choices?
Guy's a con man, please. Yeah. He's a marketing guy. He gave himself this title that's
Brilliant.
fancy. You don't need to get a master's to figure out to put the red hats with the red hats. Get over yourself. Brilliant, please.
Well said.
I worked in retail for 6 years, Dan, and they would have these people come down and they send us pictures like the wall needs to look exactly like this. It's like, well, we don't sell that in Miami. Like, we don't sell winter coats. This is ridiculous.
Okay, I think you're conflating your previous experiences in retail with someone who's actually doing interesting studies about how...
Also, by the way, I want to get my bobblehead when I show up there. I don't want to have to race people out in the third inning to get my bobblehead.
Well, they haven't
Kevin.
made... That was actually a question that I asked him. How do you do the if it's usually the first 10,000 fans or whatever, how do you then at the end say this is how many people get them and where do you keep them? And if it's time to leave, how does that... And that's why he said that they're still trying to figure out the change in how they run that particular thing. But it makes sense, when you think about it. And part of that peak end theory that he talked about, the colonoscopy one, is also that if the middle of a game and the end of a game are most exciting to you, and the end of that experience isn't actually the end of the game, you have to leave the arena, you have to get to your car, and you have to drive home. So are there ways that they can make that easier, whether that's the way you leave the arena, whether that's a special proprietary podcast that only game attendees get to listen to right after the game on their way in the parking lot when they're stuck in traffic. Because otherwise, that's what you remember is, did I like going to that game? Yes. But did I like the fact it took me this long to get home and I had to wake up the next morning and I was tired? And
I would think fans would be interested in all of that stuff.
Yeah,
Evidently not. Okay, fine.
And no one remembers a colonoscopy, please. You're knocked out.
Okay, very good.
Brilliant.
How do you know?
All right, very good.
Have you gotten a lot of colonoscopies?
I did. I don't
People
remember
been
a
up in
thing.
your butt?
Yep.
Okay.
You don't remember a thing?
Not a
At
single
Levitard
thing.
Show on
How
the
many
Twitter
drugs
poll.
did you do before
You want to update the poll here, Stugatz? You want to update the poll?
It is brought to you by Upside. Now say big on travel and get a big gift card every trip you buy. You love Upside.com. That's Upside.com. Would you pay to see Stephen A. Smith do a one-man show where he reveals all of his unreported information?
You have gross stuff on your lip.
It's corn. 70% of the audience said yes. Would you like to see raw footage of Superman with a mustache? 61% of the audience said yes. Would you like to see...
Why is there water in there?
Why not?
Why not? Who cares at this point? Would you like to see trades occur in the normal American workplace? 80% of the audience said yes.
You know what's funny about that, though? Like, none of you would want to be traded. Like, you guys want to see Bob in accounting traded, but none of you would actually want to be traded.
Funny. Is Kyrie singing I'm Coming Home a coincidence or a slight to LeBron? 75% of the audience. My man, we were on the right side of this. Fist bump. Let's go. 75% of the audience said a slight to LeBron. Those are the polls.
I want to be on your side.
Oh, you are on this one, man.
I changed my opinion.
Well, you're on the wrong side now.
I changed my mind. What a funny tension we have around here between smart and stupid, man. I'm so mad at you guys for dismissing that economist.
Nope.
A behavioral economist. You got me at that point. It does. I'd read a book if that guy was writing.
VP of Marketing.
No, that's not. You should listen to my if you were interested because you're not a sheep and you like to
I will not be
expand your
listening.
mind. Listen to my podcast with him. It's very interesting. Have you ever wondered why some things are priced with a 99 cents and some things are priced with a flat fee?
Because people are stupid and they think it's cheaper. It's a penny.
No, why why is a massage $100 instead of $99.99? Because when it's a hedonistic product, they don't want the analytic side of your brain to step in, so they don't want you to think about whether you should be paying for that. But when it's like a soap, then you're supposed to think about whether it's worth the cost.
You just heard the Dan Lebatard Show on ESPN Radio.
Hi, everyone. Stugatz here. Support for the Dan Lebatard Show podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you're confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, and your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you that same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. With Rocket Mortgage, you can apply simply and understand fully so you can mortgage confidently. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Stugatz, STUGOTZ, equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030.
Okay, keep your eyes closed.
Okay.
I want to show you my first ever painting.
All right.
Okay. Open your eyes.
Oh, that's a lot of colors and shapes.
So be honest. What do you think?
Well, I like how if you switch to Geico, you could save hundreds of dollars on car insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Here, why don't I hold your paintbrush while you call them?
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.